Kennedy, and I'm the Companion Animal Program Manager with the New York State Department of Agriculture and Markets. And today we're going to talk about the shelter standards. I know many of you may not be familiar with our department. At New York State Agriculture and Markets, we promote and regulate agriculture and work to ensure the health of New York State animals. We do not create law. Our job is really to ensure compliance and enforce the laws that are created. I know there have been some questions regarding who to contact regarding New York State law, and we encourage you to reach out to your state representatives if you have concerns. At New York State Agriculture and Markets, we have 25 animal health inspectors across the state who are licensed veterinary technicians and trained to perform these inspections. They will be the ones primarily responsible for your inspections. They currently do similar inspections for dog control officers and municipal shelters. However, these standards are much more comprehensive and are a learning process for us as much as they are for you. The inspectors are assigned based on the location of your facility, meaning you will know your inspector, and we hope you can develop a good relationship with your inspector and rely on them for information. Inspections are primarily going to be on an annual basis unless there is a complaint, concern, or non-compliant inspection. If we find there is a violation, you will be either given 7 days or 30 days to correct the issue. If it pertains to the health and welfare of animals, it will be 7 days. If it is a general violation, you will be given 30 days. Then when we come to re-inspect, we want to ensure that the issue has been addressed. What is the first year going to look like? We understand first and foremost that there's a lot of anxiety surrounding what this first year is going to look like. I want to assure everyone that our goal is not to penalize anyone unnecessarily. Our goal is really to help bring organizations into compliance. We fully understand that these are hefty standards, but we want to see that you are working to come into compliance. The first year, like I said, is going to be educational. The educational visits are going to be scheduled for after December 15th, 2025. The first unannounced visit after the educational visit will occur during your regular renewal period. You will only be issued a license after a satisfactory unannounced inspection. In order to transition organizations from a registration to a license, you need to have a current registration with our department. If you do not have a current registration with our department, then you are currently out of compliance. We also need organizations to complete the transitional application. The transitional application is a formality that will allow you to continue operating until you are officially issued a license. There is no fee associated with the transitional application. You will not be, like I said, you will not be issued a license until you have a satisfactory inspection. Your inspector is going to be reaching out late fall or early spring to schedule your educational visits. These visits are going to be mock inspections and can be utilized to ask questions and to provide you with resources. License requirements. So who's required to have a license? Really, Article 26C includes all rescues and shelters, including foster-based rescues. It does not include pet dealers, who are now, under New York state law, breeders who offer to sell 24 or more cats or dogs within a 12-month period. It also does not include sanctuaries who are not adopting out animals. A completed application needs to be submitted for licensing. We also need a 501c3, a not-for-profit certificate, a Charities Bureau registration, and bylaws. If you are a municipal organization, we only need the completed application and the $150. Training requirements. All employees or volunteers are required to be trained within the first 60 days of employment or volunteer start date. It can include webinars, conferences, or on-site CE. Trainings for each staff or volunteer must include humane handling techniques, infectious diseases, zoonotic diseases, animal cruelty, sanitation procedures, body language, and required documentation and data entry. The training documentation needs to be on file for 3 years. Ultimately, anyone with animal care responsibilities are required to complete training. There are some really great online resources that you can utilize. ASPCA Pro, ASPCA Learn, AWA, Maddie's University, Fear Free are all really great resources that you can use. We also have provided some templates for easy tracking. Doing an in-person conference or CE training, you could have a sign-in sheet with the training date and the topic, and that would be acceptable. You could also have each volunteer staff member maintain a training log. That way you can ensure that they have met categories under each of those broad topics, and where they completed the training and the date. That would also need to be provided at the time of inspection. In terms of documentation for animals, this is what we really need to see. So we want to know if the animal has any unique identifiers. Do they have a tattoo? Do they have a microchip? Do they have a rabies tag, etc.? If the animal is surrendered, we need to have the name, address, and phone number of the individual who surrendered the animal. If the animal is an Article 7 stray dog that was picked up, we need to know the location where the animal was found. We need to have the date of intake and departure from the shelter or rescue. We need to have the disposition of the animal. Was it adopted? Was it transferred? Was it euthanized? We need to have a basic animal description, so we need to know the species, age, gender, color, is it spayed or neutered? We need to know if there is any bite history. If the animal was surrendered, we need to know if the animal has bit anyone in the past. If there is any bite history, it must be disclosed in writing to whoever the animal ends up with, whether it's an adopter, a transfer partner, or reclaiming owner. We also need to have any veterinary care, behavior exams, treatments, or procedures that happened while the animal was in the care of the shelter must be documented. There's also a number of protocols that we will need to see during your inspections. We'll need to see that there's protocols in place for animal handling, behavioral assessment, enrichment and stress reduction, management of bite and scratch cases, and sanitation. In addition to those protocols, we also need to see that there are approved by a veterinarian in the following categories: nutrition and feeding, physical exam, emergency vet care, pain management, vaccinations, parasite control, anesthesia and surgery if it's done by the organization, humane euthanasia, and outbreak management. There are some really good examples of these SOPs on the New York Protection Federation website, and that's provided in the link below. In the facilities, what we want to see is that there's proper drainage and that the floors are impervious. There needs to be electric and running water. The temperature needs to be appropriate, meaning between 60 and 80 degrees. If there's an HVAC system, it needs to have regular maintenance in accordance with the manufacturer recommendations. Ammonia levels need to be less than 2 parts per million. Our inspectors have their own ammonia readers. You do not need to get your own ammonia reader. There needs to be a proper isolation area separated by a full door so that people aren't coming in and out of isolation. Sound levels cannot continuously be above 85 decibels. So the key here is really continuous. We understand that if you walk into a kennel to feed a bunch of dogs, they're going to be barking and it's going to be above 85 decibels. So what we need to see is we need to see 2 readings a week, one at resting time and one at feeding time, and it needs to be recorded on some sort of log or sheet or online document that you have every single week. Lighting cycles must be provided in normal daily light cycles, and any open food needs to be in rodent-proof containers. For primary animal enclosure housing, the animals must be provided with a big enough area for normal postural movements and allow them relief from urine and feces. They really need to be able to stand up, turn around, and not have their head and tail touch both sides of the enclosure at the same time. Their head can't touch the top of the enclosure, and they need to be able to get away from urine and feces. If they're housed in a group, they must meet those requirements, but they also must be separated by species. They must have room to social distance, and they must be separated for feeding. If you have a pregnant animal, They need a whelping and queening box provided at least 1 week prior to giving birth. If you are co-housing animals in groups, the total number of animals cannot exceed 12 adult cats, 2 litters of kittens not to exceed 10, 5 adult dogs, or 1 litter of puppies. If you are co-housing animals, you also need to make sure that they have compatible environmental requirements and they must be vaccinated and dewormed. In outdoor housing, you can't have an animal tethered for more than 30 minutes unsupervised. You also cannot have an animal housed outside for more than 12 hours in a 24-hour period except for free-roaming cats. There needs to be security from unauthorized entry of other animals, and if you have an outdoor area for cats, it needs to be fully enclosed to prevent escape. If you are using primary outdoor enclosures, you must provide protection from the elements, have adequate drainage, and have a moisture-proof insulated shelter. You also need to have adequate shade, clean, dry bedding, and a heat source if the temperature falls below 50 degrees. In terms of sanitation, what we want to see is that you have the proper cleaning products, which means they must be parvicidal and tuberculocidal. Animals must be removed from the enclosure prior to cleaning. You need to have dedicated equipment for cleaning and disinfection in each separate area, meaning isolation should have different equipment from your adoption area or your holding area or kennel area. You need to be cleaning and disinfecting the kennels between animals. You also need to clean areas daily and at least once a week disinfection of enclosures if animals are there long term. You need to have protective garments available for any animals in isolation or with suspected illnesses, and they must be available to your staff. You should also have proper hygiene signage above sinks for shelter staff, volunteers, and visitors. Staffing. So staffing should be sufficient to allow adequate time per animal for cleaning and daily feedings. Documentation should be noted if the animal is unsafe to handle or interact with daily due to poor socialization, fear, or aggression. The total number of animals housed in a facility should not exceed the total number of housing units available. Sufficient staffing should really include time for a minimum of 15 minutes per animal for cleaning and feeding, and a minimum of 20 minutes for enrichment. The animals need to be observed daily by staff, and those observations should be recorded. Animals must be handled with humane and safe physical restraint to reduce stress and injury. Each animal must be provided with at least 20 minutes of positive social interaction per day. All cats housed in a cage, kennel, or room that provides less than 18 square feet of floor space per cat for 14 days or longer should be given at least 15 minutes per day, 5 days a week outside their primary enclosure to exercise. All dogs in the shelter for 14 days or longer should be allowed outside of their primary enclosure to exercise at least 20 minutes per day, 5 days a week. The socialization and exercise timeframes can be the same depending on the activity. If you're petting a cat in its cage, then that meets the socialization requirement, but it does not meet the exercise requirement. However, if you bring that cat into an exercise room to play and socialize, that would meet both. If you pet a dog in a kennel, that meets the socialization requirement, but it does not meet the exercise requirement. If you bring a dog to a play group, that meets both the socialization and the exercise requirement. These need to be recorded every day. We do have some templates available on our website to help with this. These are not a requirement, but can be helpful in designing. These are examples of a feeding and cleaning chart that you can use. We have a similar one for social where staff can write notes. Or we do have a condensed chart where you can note the feeding, the activity, the cleaning and disinfection, on one animal's chart for the week. Veterinary care. All incoming animals need to be assessed within 2 hours of intake. This is really a triage to assess and make sure that the animal does not need emergency veterinary care. After that, each animal needs to be examined and have a full physical exam within 24 hours of intake. If you have staff available who can do the full physical exam within the 2-hour window, that would meet the 2-hour assessment and the physical exam. If you do not, then you'll have to do the 2-hour assessment to triage and make sure the animal doesn't need immediate veterinary care, and then you'll have to do the full physical exam within 24 hours. These can both be done by trained staff members or a DCO or police officer. Any animal in custody or possession of the shelter for more than 30 days needs to be weighed and examined at least once a month by staff. And for animals in foster care, they need to be weighed and examined every 6 months. This is an example of the health assessment that you can perform in 2 hours. So was the dog hit by a car? Has the dog vomited? Are they having trouble breathing? So this is really, like I said, a very quick assessment to make sure that the dog does not need immediate veterinary care. A full physical exam is something more like this, where you're assessing their weight, their attitude, their skin and coat. Do we see anything on their body? Do we see lumps? Do we see swelling? Do we notice any limping? So all of that should be more noted on the physical exam if they don't need immediate veterinary attention. Any apparently healthy animal remaining in the custody should be examined by a duly licensed veterinarian at least every 6 months or more frequently if problems are identified. If you are administering medications, they need to be documented and dispensed according to local, state, and federal laws. Animal shelters need to have the ability to provide a veterinary care and humane care in a timely fashion. So timely fashion really means as soon as you can get into the veterinarian. You should have a plan for emergency veterinary care. For other care, we need to make sure that you are making efforts to get into your veterinarian as soon as possible. Vaccines and deworming. Animals in the custody or possession of an animal shelter need to be vaccinated by the core vaccines as recommended by national standards. Currently, national standards means that dogs need to be vaccinated for canine distemper virus, adenovirus, parvovirus, and parainfluenza, so your DAPP, bordetella, and rabies. For cats, they need to be vaccinated with feline viral rhinotracheitis, calicivirus, panleukopenia, so your FVRCP, and your rabies. Core vaccine should really be given within 24 to 48 hours of admission. Dogs seized under Article 7 will not be held to the vaccine standards during the redemption period. However, when they are transferred to a shelter, they need to meet the vaccine requirements. All animals also need to be treated for hookworms and roundworms prior to release. Fecals are not required prior to deworming. Under the spay-neuter requirements, you have 3 options. You can either spay and neuter the dog before adoption, or under Ag and Markets 377A, you can adopt an animal with a $35 deposit and a written agreement with the shelter that the animal will be spayed or neutered within 30 days of adoption, or if they are not sexually mature, within 30 days of reaching 6 months of age. If that does not happen, then the owner relinquishes the $35 to the shelter, and that's put into the animal population fund. We also encourage people to utilize foster to adopt programs where the animal is placed in a foster home and is adopted only after they are officially spayed and neutered. If they are spayed and neutered at their time in the shelter, there must be a permanent tattoo placed on the ventral abdomen. If a brick and mortar shelter are doing surgeries within their organization, the animal must be examined by a duly licensed veterinarian within 24 hours of surgery and anesthesia. They must have a written anesthetic protocol, a dedicated surgical area, and they must be using aseptic technique. Foster-based organizations. So foster homes themselves will not be routinely inspected unless we find that there's a credible complaint. The foster organization is going to be inspected at the address that you provide us on your application, and it is mostly going to be paperwork based. A copy of all records must be available at the time of inspection. Foster homes must have a written agreement with the organization, and it must be current and renewed every 2 years. We also expect them to maintain records like health exams, CVIs, vaccine records, and the date that the animal was received at the foster location. They must also have a written protocol for infectious or contagious disease, and they must be able to house animals with infectious or contagious disease in a separate area. That can be a mudroom, a bathroom, a spare room, as long as there's another space that they can keep that animal. If animals are 4 months or older, they are required to be licensed in the town they are harbored. So if they are in foster care and they are 4 months or older, they should be licensed in the town that they are with the foster. So we are just going to touch on transportation. The transportation section of this law mostly pertains to transport vehicles that are traveling 6, 8, 10 hours from other states. So we'll just touch on this. So transportation, you must adhere to federal, state, and local laws. You cannot have animals unconfined or tethered in the back of a pickup truck or a flatbed truck. Animals must be confined in a crate, carrier, or cage within the vehicle. If the animal is located in a cargo space, it must be heated or cooled to provide normal thermoregulation, which means that it needs to be between 60 and 85 degrees. The transport vehicle needs to be cleaned and disinfected between transports. If you are transporting multiple animals, they need to be individually identified. The shelter must also have a contact point for every stop along the route they make. No animal shelter can transport a dog or cat less than 1 year from any breeder licensed with the USDA into New York. If animals are coming into New York State from a different state, they must be held for 48 hours before they are allowed to be adopted. This is to ensure that we are adopting healthy animals to New York State residents. If the animal exhibits any signs of infectious, contagious, or parasitic disease, they need to be isolated and seen by a veterinarian. Here are some of those resources that we were talking about. So sheltervet.org, AVMA, ASPCA. Our website has a lot of the templates, New York State Ag and Markets. The New York State Animal Protection Federation also has a lot of those SOPs. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me and ask me directly. I'm happy to help.